Hi Gina.
Hi Ione, hi everyone. I'm Gina, the senior editor of Polyester.
And I'm Ione, the founding editor-in-chief of Polyester, and this is the Polyester Podcast, a feminist pop culture podcast dissecting the discourse on a weekly basis.
Before we start, if you're a fan of this podcast, please make sure to like, rate and subscribe. And if you really love us, you can sign up for a podcast membership where you can join our WhatsApp, get on Instagram close friends, and now get access to our podcast research for only £3 a month.
$3.50, isn't it?
A bargain either way.
Yeah, I saw there was a review that was like, how do I get on the close friends? So the answer is sign up for the, no, not close friends, how do I get on the group chat? So if you sign up for the membership, you get on the group chat.
Yeah, and when you sign up for a membership, you email hello@polyester, and then we give you all the info about your membership.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it doesn't let us send like individual emails to individual people about the individual different memberships.
Sure.
So you need to, once you've signed up, and it does pop up and tell you to do this, email hello@polyester.com and we'll give you all the info. And don't try to pretend you've got one, because I always check.
Okay, well, I'll save this review for next week now that we had that little aside.
No, I want to know.
No, it's fine. Because I saw there was some people being like, they don't get into it quick enough. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Fucking hell, fast forward and laugh. It's got the 15-second button. I'm always flying through that when there's adverts and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And also, if you don't listen to our reviews about how great we are, that's mean.
We just love interacting with our community.
Yeah, sorry for caring about what people think.
So today I'm already exhausted by this topic.
Yeah, it's funny that you want to go into it, I think.
Why?
Because you have such like a bold opinion on it.
What? Me? No. So today we're doing the polyamory episode.
The polyamory episode. Say that 5 times quick.
Gina, what is your experience with polyamory?
I have been in a polyamorous relationship before.
And you fucking hated it.
I hated it afterwards. When it was good, it was good. When it was bad, it was bad. But I also do think that like any breakup is bad, so...
Oh, here she is, acting like fucking Switzerland. That's not what you say behind closed doors.
Only because I fucking hate both those exes.
No.
And they know it.
Okay. So,
but getting railed by 2 people at once is always a slay.
Today we're talking about polyamory, mostly because of challenges, which obviously features a kind of like sexual tension.
Yeah, like a menage a trois.
Yeah, between 3 characters. Between Mike Feist, Zendaya, and oh my god, what's his name? Josh,
the little. Oh, the big one. Josh O'Connor.
Josh O'Connor. He's the big one.
The big one, the little one. It's like Boy Genius.
Yeah. So that's kind of like catapulted it into the limelight again. But I also think this has just been a year in which there has been a spotlight on polyamory that has been like culminating up to this moment. Like I would say over the last 5-6 years, it's been about more. And obviously before then, especially in the types of circles we're in that are like queer circles, people that have like non-conventional lives, I suppose. It's probably a lot more common for us than a lot of other like friendship groups or like wider circles.
Yeah, for it to be a topic of discussion.
Yeah, but it really feels like it's kind of like broken
into the mainstream.
Yeah. When Siham was doing the research, I did a Google of like polyamory, New York Times, and there was literally like 8 articles in the past few months. So it's definitely something that the press as well, like hammering on about. And something that Siham noticed when we were doing the research too was that every outlet kind of has the same article, like what to do if you're thinking about opening up your relationship, or like why polyamory changed my life, or
it's the fucking SEO-ification of fucking any topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they're trying to like hit all the people being like, should I be polyamorous? And then like the New York Times is like, we want to be the most read article for that. Why do you want to be? Fuck off. We had an article on the Dollhouse last year as well being like that cinema is really taking a liking to threesomes. So Passages, is it called? Passages came out last year, which was really good, but it wasn't really about a throuple. It was about a bisexual having sex with both, like cheating on his husband basically.
With a woman?
With a woman. Mm-hmm. And then they get back together.
Oh, okay, so there wasn't like any...
There was no throupling involved.
I suppose...
But it's being marketed as throupling, which I think is the same as Challenges, because everyone I know who's seen it, disclaimer, not seen it yet, seen it this weekend, will shape my opinions in the comments section next week, I'm sure, also isn't about a throuple.
Yeah, and people are being like, it's not as gay as it should be, etc, etc, etc. And it's kind of like permeating other types of culture. So I've recently, after my monumentous task of watching all 13 seasons of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills in 3 months, I've now moved on to Vanderpump Rules. Started at like season 8, I think, but last season, which was
how many seasons has it got?
like 11 or 12.
I thought it was brand spanking new. I thought they'd been like 2.
No, it's been going for 10 years.
Well, that explains why it's so dramatic then that they cheated. Because I thought that like they opened the series with like them being...
No, Ariana and Tom Sandoval were together like nearly the whole time the show's been on.
That's crazy. I thought like it started with them like maybe being on the rocks.
But no.
And it'd been introduced to be like, they've been together for 10 years.
No. And then Raquel, who was the woman in it, was dating James from it for like 5 years.
Right.
So it's like they were... just both dating other people in the cast, and then they had an affair with each other.
That's disgusting.
But there was like a conversation in that series, or like a plot line where it was like someone was spreading rumours. Sheena tried to say that Katie spread a rumour that Tom and Ariana were in an open relationship. But it was very much like, no, we're not. That's disgusting. Like, it wasn't like, oh, maybe.
Oh, this
it
is like being in school, isn't it? Like, well, Lauren said to Hannah, said to...
Oh, it's that. Yeah. It's 100% that. I love it. It makes me want to start drama in my own life, which is something I'm very much past.
Yeah, please don't.
It makes me want to fight someone. Because they all literally fight each other.
Physically?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Like, throw glasses on each other and shit.
How was that? Do they have to sign... They must have to sign, like, a heavy, like...
Yeah, but it's worth it.
Signing away if they write.
Anyway, this isn't actually about rules. This is about polyamory.
So just gabbing away.
So it's something that's kind of entering pop culture more and more often. And, for example, like, probably our mums would know what some of the cultural zeitgeist is around polyamory and open relationships now, I'd say.
I love that that's like our like
Yeah,
understanding of something like in the public and just not a lot knowledge.
Well, Vicky's Kitchen obviously does if you were in one.
She doesn't know, I don't think. She doesn't listen.
She will now.
I don't think she listens.
So there's many terms.
Does your mum listen?
I think sometimes, yeah. There's many terms for polyamory and many kind of iterations of it. Obviously, polyamory isn't new just because our generation started doing it. It's been around for ages. So, should we go through some of them or?
It'd be fun, yeah.
I mean, maybe let's just describe what polyamory is. Do you want to describe it, Gina, as our
resident
shagger?
Polyamory is when you can be in a relationship with more than one person at one time.
Go into it a bit more.
Ow.
So it's like there's primary partners, isn't there?
Not necessarily. There's different types of polyamory. So like typically you'd be like a couple and then you are both having relationships with other people as well, like additionally.
Yeah.
But then there's like level playing field like what's it called? Non-hierarchical polyamory where there's no primary partners. So everyone's just like the same. And that's kind of like the one that you kind of see like trotted out in the press a lot, where it's like this woman has 3 husbands and they're all raising 4 kids together and they're all like, nobody knows who the babies are.
Yeah.
Dads are. Like, those are the kind of ones. But the ones that like I interact with, I think the most within our community, not like on a shagging level. I am what's it called? Monogamous now. Well, currently. Is the primary partners thing. I think that's the more typical way that this takes form.
So what does that mean?
So, like, people would be in a couple and they also will date other people. Their primary partner is the one that they, like, see as, like, the one that they have to give the most, like, not necessarily the strongest emotional bond with, but the person that they might live with and, like, spend the most time with and stuff like that.
And then there's polycules. What's that?
A polycule is kind of like what I described, like, there's loads of different relationships going on and, like, you can be, like, friends.
And, like, all with each other, kind of.
All with each other, or, like, you have, like, a relationship with the other person that's in it. So, like, you'll be close friends, which is called a metamor.
Fuck me.
Which is your partner's other partners who you are not dating, but you've got, like, a friendship with.
So then there's also open relationships, which is when you're in a relationship, you can shag other people, but not have relationships with them.
Yeah, you can't have, like, an emotional connection if you're in an open relationship.
Swinging, which in my opinion, bring it back, is the most chic term of all of this.
Swinging is, like, group sex or, like, keys in a bowl.
Yeah.
The Grinch's parents.
Yeah. Let's take it back.
Taking it back to the old school. And then... I don't know, I think that kind of...
Hierarchical polyamory, when you and your partner can have relationships, romantic or sexual, with other people, but have agreed to remain each other's primary partner. You might pursue these relationships as a couple or separately. non-hierarchical polyamory, which is what you said, solo poly,
Solo poly's made up. You're just dating.
which is when a single person pursues multiple intimate or sexual relationships while trying to avoid riding the relationship escalator. This means you're not particularly interested in, say, sharing a home or bank account with any one person. But in the research, it said that, like, a lot of the people that approach solo polyamory are looking for couples. So I think that's where it's different.
Right, okay, fine. They're being like the unicorn, like people look for on...
Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah.
On dating app.
Yeah. I'm going to try and withhold as much judgment as I can.
I know, you're really, like, tense, like... And I'm like, la, la, la. And then there's other, like, really, like, more, like, specific terms, like one penis policy. That means, like, the most hated concept in the world, ethical non-monogamy. A cis straight man only allows his female partner to sleep with people who don't have penises.
Well, it's also, like, giving turf in some weird way, like, it's giving gender essentialism.
Yeah. Polysaturated is when you've reached maximum capacity. Like, I don't need to date any more people.
Me when I'm married to one person.
And then the relationship escalator, which I only mentioned earlier, is like the way that monogamous people by default level up their romantic relationships, which is kind of like what we touched on last week with the gamification of relationships. So you go from dating to becoming exclusive to living together to getting married to merging your finances to having kids to whatever the fuck else happens after that. You die together, I guess.
I mean, that's interesting as well because it kind of like assumes monogamy is this structure that is immovable, so they are the levels of monogamy, whereas that's not really true anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, polyamory is provided as this alternative to monogamy, which is like seen as like a death trap, etc., and that you have to like merge your bank accounts, have kids, all of these things. But like, me and my husband don't share finances.
I also think it's just...
And don't want
they don't
kids.
need to be pitted against each other. That's kind of like mentioned really like far deep in our research where someone's like, it doesn't need to be monogamy versus non-monogamy. They're not binary opposites. They're just pairs that play off each other. They're two aspects of a single system for relating sexually, romantically, socially and culturally with different parts of life. And that's from Fraught Intimacies by Nathan Rambukkana. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, and polyamory is kind of like, and it's set up in like all these articles, which is like, you're thinking about polyamory, you're thinking about opening up your relationship. Polyamory is not the solution to bad monogamy. It's a separate thing. It's a separate type of relationship. Opening up your relationship isn't going to save it.
Well, I think it's interesting that you had that like positive reading on Fraught Intimacies, Non-Monogamy in Public Spheres by Nathan Rambukkana, because I read it as kind of like shade, but probably that's just like my predetermined biases. So yeah, it says monogamy and non-monogamy are less binary opposites, an opposed pair whose sides play off each other than they are two aspects of a single system, blah blah blah. One would be tempted to class marriage as an exemplar of monogamy, yet it creates adultery as its shadow, a non-monogamous form. A second example shows the inverse, conventional polygamy, as a similar societal how do you say that word,
I don't care.
Okay. Is non-monogamous by definition, but in using the same tropes of possession and male dominance that many associate with monogamy, it also stands as a form of heteronormativity par excellence, heteronormativity multiplied, which I thought was like such an interesting point because again, obviously we are not used to seeing like open polyamory, whatever, in heteronormative terms because like we don't know that many heteronormative people.
Yeah.
And so I think by talking about like the rise of this type of relationship, it's important to talk about like how it enters like polite society, quote unquote, as you'd say in Poor Things. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do middle class, upper middle class, rich people actually approach polyamory? Because obviously they've also been doing that forever. Like the royal family, allegedly, are always cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for show, a lot of the relationships.
That's like historically what marriage is. Like marriage as a concept that actually works is only for like lower middle class people like that are pursuing an American dream. Like it's a very westernized lower class ideal and rich people just get to fuck around and do whatever they want normally.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting again in the research where someone says basically about couple centricity as this like the specific term that they use, and they're saying that the problem, like people benefit from being in monogamous relationships and being married in a monogamous relationship like by the state, like you get like tax write-offs, stuff like that, and that's kind of like why monogamy is deified, and like and that's like why culture is obsessed with it, because of like these benefits. But I just really didn't agree. Like I thought like the problem then isn't with people pursuing that, it's with like a state that benefits people who are monogamous.
I agree, but
I think like people who are getting married for benefits and seeing that as like a negative is the point of view of someone who's rich.
I don't really understand your point, sorry.
Like they're saying in this research, they're like, the people are against polyamory because they see getting married and monogamy as a positive because they get benefits from it. And I'm like, yeah, but those people are people who choose to get married for those benefits aren't doing it because they hate polyamorous people. They're doing it because they need to survive.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting not to bring it back to Real Housewives. This is another thing playing out. So Mauricio Umansky and Carl Richards are currently in the midst of a separation. And it's been like teased that Carl might be in a sapphic relationship with Morgan Wade, who is like this younger country singer. But they took ages to file for divorce. And they haven't even filed yet. They've separated, they're living separate lives, but they haven't filed because neither of them were rich when they got together, which was 27 years ago. And now they're like multi-millionaires, obviously didn't have a prenup and they can't split finances. I think that's where it becomes like, again, bring it back to a class issue. It's like rich people are the people that have to think about this stuff, like not really that every woman. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it ties back to like in the research it says this, and making my point I feel like I'm just using the same sentence structure.
Which research?
There's a bit where they're talking about, it says it kind of like throughout, where people are like, well, what we benefit from polyamory is that, especially with raising kids, is that it takes a community to raise a child, and that's like what people are saying that is good for like child rearing. But I feel like that sense of community has always existed in like less upper class systems anyway.
100%. And there was a counterpoint where it was like, if you are thinking about like new utopian structures of family, who is that domestic responsibility going to fall on? Because like it's not likely to be the men. Like obviously there's like every exception to the rule, and I think we have more and more men now that like want to stay home with the kids more, have domestic responsibility, all of this type of thing. But like traditionally, and if we're speaking about marriage as like a patriarchal structure, etc., 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 that's just going to be loads of women looking after the kids.
Yeah, literally. And I also think like the way that marriage is spoken about as like, we're eschewing marriage, we're eschewing the traditional relationship core, like is just straight people wanted to be interested, not to be horrible, but like it's like they need to like queerify a relationship to like make it like straight people just this has been happening. And it says so much times, like over and over, like this happens. People like have like aunties who are like lesbians who are raising like a kid that they had like a man like 10 years ago, and like the man's still involved and like comes around and sleeps over in like the spare room and stuff like that. Like group raising of families and traditional relationship structures have always existed
in working
class communities, and specifically queer communities as well. And I think like all these terms that have been applied to it, from like it going from being like an open relationship to even not needing a name, like I feel like it just didn't need a name for years, that like this application of like what's it called, like when something's like
a hierarchy and a structure.
No, like the like therapy speak, but it's like from like books. What's the word?
Like intellectualism.
Yeah, the intellectualization of this format that has already existed for years, giving it all these different titles and definitions, is only being used by people who want to legitimize not having the privilege of being in a monogamous relationship anymore.
I feel like we were just doing up. It's two dumb bitches telling each other exactly. But I also think there's like a arrogance of the millennial middle class, like that they're the people that are inventing this, like through apps and like through this, that they can like. God. forge these alternative lifestyles and all of this. And yeah, it ignores like such a deep history of non-conventional familial structures existing forever. Like, obviously it's also indicative, like this is slightly different, but in how millennials have taken up queer family as like or chosen family as like such a thing, as if that like hasn't existed ever since like the fucking first brick was thrown, and before. Like, marginalized people have always sought solace in each other. Queer people have always been like quite open with who they have sex with. Not like, it's not hard and fast, but do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we live in these like open communities that are nice to each other, that support each other, but like now we have to be like, it's my chosen family.
Yeah, it's my polycule.
We have to like legitimize everything.
Yeah, it's this literal like, we legitimize things by giving them terms.
Yeah.
And then using those terms and like the specific ascriptions given to them as like ways to like make ourselves feel smarter about things that already existed, or make ourselves feel like more,
we're doing something different. We're like forging. It's middle class exceptionalism. I'm sorry, it just
is. I thought like to go into like the terminology of it, like changing, making it shit. I found that really happening in Redefining Our Relationships by Wendy Omatic. That was in the research. It's an essay, and it's saying like, non-monogamy has permitted me to commit to a relationship with my best friend that would not have reached the depth of emotion and intimacy had we both been in restrictive or possessive relationships. What the fuck are you on about?
I also just think that's so false. Like, I don't feel like I need to shag you to be close to you.
Yeah, literally, it's like 12 years later, we are deeply in love. Despite being platonic, we have found countless ways to express our love and commitment. She is my soulmate and lover as much as my partner.
That's just being friends. If you're
friends, then like, you're not. That's not part of a polycule to be friends with someone. It's not part of a romantic. You don't like this romanticizing my friendship with my friends. Like, yeah, romantic love isn't the best love you can have.
Yeah,
it's not the be all and end all, and that comes from the government and all these structures being put in place to make nuclear families seem like the best thing that you can have, and like romantic love and like these like family structures, trying to recreate them and like recreate those models and reuse those terms
in places that they don't
need to be placed in, is continuing that hierarchy. Is not making it an even playing field at all. Like, I want to say that I platonically love someone and that have the same weight as a romantic love without having to redefine it as a romantic love for people to see it as legitimized.
Well, something that I also thought was really interesting in Jennifer Wilson's piece for The New Yorker, How Did Polyamory Get So Popular, is that polyamory in the 90s and 80s was actually like quite conservative. As you were saying, it like was protecting people, because in our head we obviously, like, as people that didn't live through that, were thinking of like the 60s and like people shagging at Woodstock or whatever, but there's a book by historian Christopher M. Gleason called American Poly, which this article says focuses more narrowly on the post-1960s polyamory movement. Gleason argues persuasively that contemporary polyamory as a set of ideas and practices was articulated by the kind of free love advocates best positioned to survive conservative backlash in the 1980s. These tended to be socially liberal, fiscal conservatives who wanted to be as free as the market. Blew my mind. And then it goes into like how they basically set up polyamory as kind of like a religion. I can't find the term for it, but it was saying, as backlash to the sexual revolution took hold in the 1980s, polyamory adapted itself to the times. Gleason cites the impact of one person in particular, Ryan Nearing, a Kerrystone-curious woman who settled outside Eugene, Oregon with her two husbands. Nearing had split off from the movement over issues of organised religion. She found Kerrysta, that's what it's called, as dogmatic as the Catholicism she'd left behind, and romantic attachment. She didn't want a best friend identity cluster, she wanted a marriage with two men. So then in 1994, two people, Nearing and Anapol, began putting out a magazine titled Loving More. Their aim was to wrap the project of polyamory in language that they thought would be well received by the mainstream. In messaging the benefits of polyamory, they emphasised its reliance on honesty, personal responsibility, and a structured code of ethics, which isn't very, like...
It's embarrassing. Like, why do you need your relationship validified by society?
And then Gleason writes, rather they internalise the conservative emphasis on stability and commitment, reframing the sustainment of multiple intimate partners not as an undoing of family values, but as a necessary evolution in familial dynamics that better safeguarded the family from alienation, isolation and economic hardships of the post-nuclear age, which is very Fallout coded, like loads of people living in bunkers and like living interconnectedly.
It also ties back to this woman who wrote a book about open monogamy in 2021, who's quoted in the New Yorker, and she says she attributes the acceptance of a great number of partners to pandemic-born domestic ennui. And I thought that was interesting as well. Like, people need, and I kind of tangentially went off on that in my own head to be like, the cost of living crisis and stuff, people want to have these lifestyles but also like can't afford to anymore. And even like the value of our time, like people don't have like the time to just like have time with just their friends and then time with their partner and then time with another group of friends and then time to go to work and stuff like that. Especially if like you're working from home as well, like the home becomes like a weird space for you that you need to kind of like have this change in like what's going on in that home to like make it more interesting and exciting to you.
But how the fuck do people even have the time?
That's the meaning. You have to, what someone says in the thing being like, polyamorous people have a scheduling fetish.
That's,
Steph on our team said this to me and I thought it was so good. She was like, some people have sex as a hobby.
Yeah.
And
well, polyamory is like not a hobby, but it's like...
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's been so like... What was the other thing we were saying is like a lifestyle for people now? I can't remember, but it's just been hammered home so much as like, it's this lifestyle. You look a certain way if you're polyamorous, you act a certain way, you go to, especially in London, you like go to certain clubs, you live a certain way, and it's just like, sorry, I find it absolutely exhausting.
It's the same as like kinky people. Back in the day, do you remember like whenever we used to go like kink clubs and stuff?
Yeah.
Like a few years ago, maybe like pre-pandemic, and it became like a whole thing. And I think it's just weird to define your life and your personality and like how you present yourself online and how you talk to other people by your relationship or relationships in this case.
I think it goes back to the thing of us being like our generation being obsessed with definitions. So when I was reading this research, really like false equivalences keep coming up. So like in addition to genetic essentialism, we have in our culture couple essentialism. That's so deeply offensive on so many levels.
Yeah, it's fucked. And it's again like I hate this thing where people
you're not being oppressed in your polyamorous relationship.
Trying to legitimize what they feel by comparing it to other things, and this is like and comparing it to oppression, being marginalized,
like structural actual oppression, like
exactly. Just because you're not, they really need this to become mainstream for them to feel legitimized in what they're doing, which is just sad. It's just sad, and that's like what happens when straight people get involved in like queer business. And it really reminds me of like that. It kind of reminds me of like, remember when like gay marriage was being like, well, we're old, but remember when like gay marriage was being like legalized, and loads of like queer anarcho theory was out being like, we don't want marriage, like I do not want to get married to someone, why is that seen as the lifestyle that I need to have, like why can't I just embrace like my lifestyle being different and not like aligning with that. And I think this is the same thing, like if you're going to be polyamorous, you don't need, if you're going to be, you might be polyamorous, you might be like naturally inclined to being polyamorous, you might be a polyamorous person. I know lots of polyamorous people and I love them, and I have been polyamorous.
Yeah,
you do not need that.
You
other
need
people
validation.
To accept it. You don't need other people to validate it. You don't need it, like maybe on a monetarily level it would be nice to get a tax break from it.
Yeah,
sure. But you need to look at yourself and be like, why do I crave for this to be seen as normal? Like, what do you get out of being normal? And that's so like that t-shirt in the like American horror
normal
story.
People scare me.
Normal people scare me. But like, do you know what I mean? Like, why? Like, and as someone as a marginalized person, I think like I've always benefited so much from embracing fatness as like countercultural rather than like trying to align it with like the standards of society. And I think that's can so easily be applied here. Like, what do you gain out of making this the new norm? Yeah,
but you're confusing like two things. Like, you're an actual marginalized person.
Yeah,
straight couples that open up are not marginalized.
Like, they've taken something that's queer and they're trying to make it be normal.
Yeah, but they're being like, why do we need to be accepted? It's like, because these people are accepted in every other facet of their life. Like, they're not used to being marginalized. They're not used to being put in like a box that is at a disadvantage in society. The other quote, just to prove that there was more than one, was in For Lovers and Fighters by Dean Spade, and it was saying, I see people resisting the common sense of monogamy just as we resist the common sense we inherit about racism, class, gender and sexuality in our culture.
Just goes to show, doesn't it? Says it all.
Bizarro. And I also think when we're talking about, like, you know, how people are oppressed by marriage, people are oppressed by monogamy. Okay, we talk about that all the time, and I'm not trying to do like whataboutism, because I'm sure in polyamorous communities there are conversations about this, but do you know who else is like oppressed by monogamy and marriage? Like single parents, people like that are abused in their marriages. Like, we can't just talk about marriage as the spectrum of either or. Like, some people, especially like not even just generations older than us, there's going to be always people that get married and have bad situations and have children, like, and then have to raise them by themselves. And we should be focusing more on like actually supporting them rather than like, you know, make polyamory acceptable.
Make polyamory a tax write-off.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we need to support the actual people that are like at an economic disadvantage from out of marriage. Like, we need to talk about that. But this isn't talking about that. This is just being like something else.
If we're talking on an emotional level as well, the people who are the most fucked over by like the normalising, the need for love that's emphasised in our society is chronically single people.
Yeah.
Who are probably, and I was single for like 5 years and it was dog shit. Like, it was like just so upsetting, and it makes me think like if we stopped putting so much value on romantic relationships, would that have been the same?
Well, this is what Eden said as well when she put like polyamory in her out list, like for 2023, was it? And then she was like, as someone that's always on the apps, like literally men putting like polyamorous in their bio or like saying that they're poly is just an excuse to treat women like shit. And we need to talk about like how people, probably mostly men, are using like this as an opportunity just to be shit as well.
That's exactly what happens when something like this becomes the mainstream.
Yeah.
Exactly what happens, because it'll then just get like fucking used by something. It'll get commodified to the point where people can just reuse it for their own fucking narcissistic needs.
That's what loads of the research says as well.
And again, I think like as a marginalised person because of my body, that's what happened with body positivity, and I can see that happening with different relationships, yeah.
And it's not a hard and fast rule. Like, there's people that are in like polyamorous situations, relationships that like file under all of these terms, that have like happy lives that they navigate with no more difficulty than anyone else. But if you're talking about something on a wider scale, it's important to address the wider issues.
Definitely. And I think like there's also a bit in the research that's talking about like this, it was born out of like WASP society as well, and traditionally open, and like we said, like historically these kinds of relationships have always existed, and they've been like taken away from us by like a society that benefits from putting people in monogamous relationships. And it's worth, I don't know, the end.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Ione.
Thank you, Siham, for the research and for sound teching. And
thank you, Olivia, for editing.
There we are. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.